Okay, we do have a quorum. I'd like to welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. With that, we'll move on to regular business, approval of the agenda. A motion, second.
I move to accept the agenda.
Motion and a second to accept the agenda. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. Approval of the minutes of February 23rd.
Move to approve the minutes of February 23rd. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor say aye. Motion carries. Director's report, Chad.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the Transportation Technical Advisory Committee. Good to see you all. We have a few reports to report to you, beginning with Transportation Improvement Program. Development. The new tip is going to be developed, and it is due this, this August, fall 2026. So Nick, here, update that, Nick.
Thank you, Chad. We have completed the call for projects for the new tip, the 27 to 30 tip. 26 projects came in, 22 of which requested to receive suballocated funding, or rather to be considered for suballocated federal funding. The Project Selection Committee will consider those projects this month and next month. We do not know up front exactly how many meetings it will take, but they will come up with those recommendations shortly, which will then be brought back to the TAC and the TPB for approval. And of course, for this tip, it is not just the projects receiving suballocated funding that will need to be in the tip, but also all other projects that are either federally funded or regionally significant. And we will make sure to have all those projects in the tip as well for the final version. A quick rundown of the projects that were submitted for suballocated funding consideration: 6 from Wichita Public Works, 2 from Wichita Transit, 3 from Sedgwick County, 1 a joint project of Goddard and Sedgwick County, 1 from just Goddard, 3 from Andover, 2 from Mays, 1 from Bel Air, 1 from Hayesville, 1 from Mulvane, and 1 from Valley Center. Definitely, the PSC would not be able to give suballocated funding to all of these projects, not even close. So we will see how that goes. And a reminder again of the timeline for all of this. We are now in the March and April 2026 period for the PSC meetings. If, according to this tentative timeline, we get recommendations from the PSC when we think we will, this would come back to the TAC for a recommendation on those recommendations at the next meeting. Then the TPB in May. Then in May and June, the state and federal reviewers would go over the overall TIP document, not just the suballocated funding part, leading to a public comment period from June 11th to July 10th, then a TAC in July, and TPB in August for approval of the overall plan. Any questions on this before we move on? Okay.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you all for your collaboration, because development of TIP is every jurisdiction has to contribute and submit the projects, and your help is appreciated to make it more inclusive of all. And collaboration is something WAMPO staff is committed to, and then your participation is very much appreciated. So the next item we have is request for proposals. That is Peter. Peter, thanks.
Good morning, TAC members. I just want to give a quick update on 2 requests for 2 procurements, or that started as our request for proposals. Currently have our regional active transportation plan. So some background on this. An RFP for development of a regional active transportation plan was originally issued in summer of 2025. What followed was a standard procurement process, and that culminated in the selection of a consultant and development of a contract. A final contract was presented to TPP in December of 2025 as a consent item. At that time, the TPP voted not to move forward with the contract. There was some concerns related to the cost of the project, and it was offered that perhaps WAMPO staff could do this in-house over an extended time frame of maybe 2 to 3 years instead of the 1 year as described in the proposed contract. So it was discussed that WAMPO would pursue development of the active transportation plan in-house rather than proceed with an outside consultant. At the February 2026 TPP meeting, the prior direction was reconsidered. They discussed I wouldn't necessarily say urgency, but as more of a priority to get this done sooner was one of the things discussed at the meeting, to do this in a 1 year time frame rather than deal with some of the uncertainty with staff doing it in a 2 to 3 year time frame. And then also there was a concern brought up that as it is right now, WAMPO staff would probably benefit, or this plan would benefit from having an outside engineer look at any projects that would come as a result of this plan. So at that point in time, in the February meeting, staff were directed to pursue development of the ATP with an outside consultant. Given that we'd already done a procurement for this, we talked to our legal counsel and they recommended reissuing the RFP as the most appropriate path forward, which we did. So we issued an RFP again for the active transportation plan development on February 17th. The proposal deadline was March 4th. We received 2 proposals. And as of right now, a selection committee has been formed. They have reviewed the proposals and we have interviews scheduled for this week, actually tomorrow. And then just a quick update on the household travel survey. I understand we went through the longer form of this presentation in my absence at the past TAC meeting. So just quick update, a consultant has been selected this past December. A draft contract has been developed. We're currently coordinating with KDOT to ensure cost documentation is consistent with FHWA guidelines and meets requirements reimbursement. Again, so it said the total cost of services is projected at $900,000, and we anticipate a contract is offered for TPP consent this spring.
Any questions for Peter and I? Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. And next project we have is Safe Routes to School. Again, we appreciate each of your participation in this project. Without you, this project wouldn't have been successful. And Kim had been leading this with our consulting firm. So Kim has a status update.
Good morning, TAC members and partners. Just a brief update to let you know exactly where we're at in the process. As you are aware, we're currently working with the 54 schools throughout our region, including 4 of those private schools. And we are also recruiting for this round of data collection. So if you know of any schools within your jurisdiction or area that you would like to include in this process, we currently have 4 new schools that have been submitted. So we definitely have room for additional schools. So we are looking for those right now. And then just a brief timeline, just to give you an update. The top half of the timeline is for those existing schools. So we're still working on those existing condition reports for all 54 schools. So we're still working through that with the consultant team and with staff. And we are getting those completed here right now. So we are in the process actually of scheduling those school meetings where we will also ask for your expertise and assistance in looking at those reports. Then after that is done, we will be looking at your expertise to look at the final recommendations to include in those final reports. On the bottom half of the timeline is for the new schools that we're bringing on. We will be doing all the data collection this spring, trying to get that done, wrapped up before the end of the school year so that they can receive their plan on a timely basis by the end of this year. So that's where we're at with the schools. We have our website with the interactive map if you'd like to see which schools are participating. And again, please let me know if you have any that would like to join the effort. Any questions?
Thanks, good.
Okay, well, my next favorite topic, May is Bike Month. So we are just around the corner. As you know, the weather is warming up. I'm seeing people out everywhere. And we just wanted to bring to your attention that many cities, counties, and organizations across the U.S. have been celebrating National Bike Month to showcase the benefits, help raise awareness, and encourage people to get outside and ride. Enjoy all that great infrastructure you all are putting in. So there's a few dates on the calendar that are national dates that are celebrations, including, I wanted to highlight May 6th is National Bike to School Day, and we do have several schools participating. So you will see the kiddos getting excited for that day. Hopefully we won't have rain. Last year we had rain, but they still rode, you know, kids. They were still smiling. And then, of course, May 11th through 17th is National Bike to Work Week. So we are working, we have a committee that's working, and they're encouraging work sites as well. There is a flyer on your table there with some of this information. So we're encouraging jurisdictions, if interested, there's several things they could do, of course, to celebrate National Bike Month and to encourage residents to get out again and try some of that safe infrastructure you're putting in. So there will be a lot of proclamations going on throughout the region. There's always partners interested in hosting bike safety rodeos. And maybe if you are interested, you could also host a ride or conduct a bike audit. So just some ideas of ways that the jurisdictions here in our region do celebrate National Bike Month for your consideration. So any questions on Bike Month?
Thanks so much, Ken.
Thank you.
Next item we have is Amtrak update, and you may know, like, there's so much going on, studies and so on. So Kate is going to update, and I'll also chime in on status of this.
All righty. Hello, TAC. WAMPO wanted to give an update on Amtrak in Kansas. I have this slide and another slide soon. Hold on, I get there. And especially, I want to talk about the Heartland Flyer extension from Oklahoma City up to Newton. WAMPO is not asking for funding of any sort with this report, similar to loop more of the region into knowing what's going on. So the Kansas Passenger Rail Caucus held a meeting on February 25th of 2026. The recorded video can be found on the Kansas Legislature's YouTube channel. About 5 different groups, such as one from Texas and one from Amtrak, gave presentations. So I do highly recommend watching through the presentations. It's about an hour and a half long, not too long. So KDOT had to restart their study to examine establishing the extension, which is step 1 scoping, and it did push back their timeline to proceed to step 2 of corridor ID grant. The extension will be subsidized, and FRA funding will phase out over the initial 7 years. Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas will fund the service. There we go. That's right. And there it is a little bit more. And then the other aspect of this was just discussing, the history of why, Amtrak in the area and why it may be needed to be restarted. So I have 2 right here. I have the San Francisco Chief Route, which ran from 1954 to 1971. And then the Lone Star Route, which was from 1974 to 1979. So for the Lone Star Route, there were quite a few different reasons for why they decided to discontinue it. So poor ridership at the time of a 1978 US DOT analysis led to a discontinuation in October of the next year. And then there were Texas stops that were added to a different route until Fort Worth, San Antonio segment were served by a different Amtrak that started in 1981, which was the Texas Eagle. And then for the San Francisco Chief Route, it was another analysis from Amtrak, US DOT, that favored the California Zephyr, which I believe is still in service today. And that one was found a little bit more favorable to serve the Chicago to San Francisco endpoints, which DOT recommended that instead of the San Francisco Chief Route.
Anything else, Katie?
No, I'm all good.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So I just wanted to update you guys that, these 2 routes that Katie is illustrating is the discontinued routes. One is San Francisco Chief route that was discontinued in 1971, and then Lone Star route that was discontinued in 1979. So these two were became a strong case why this Heartland Flyer is a great project or a valid project because there was already a route, and this becomes a good candidate. So, and the couple of things that we want to share with you is there are two studies that is happening with the Federal Railroad Administration, FRA. One is called Long Distance Service Study. That is which anytime the route is more than 750 miles, it is those studies are taking place for the entire network. For example, like long distance like Dallas to Chicago and those examples. And the corridor identification is a small project, which is this type of projects connecting Oklahoma City, Newton, Wichita, and then Kansas City. So Kansas City, Newton, Wichita, and Oklahoma City, these types of corridors are called, because they're less than 750 miles, these are on a different program called Corridor Identification Program. So what's happening is KDOT, Corey Davis is collaborating with Oklahoma Department of Transportation and Texas Department of Transportation about these corridors. There are three parts to this corridor ID program. The first part is scope. Scope is just, what makes sense, what cities to be connected is number one. And then number two is service development plan. Once the scope is developed, what's the plan of service? How many trains and how many we are serving? What's the demand and all that? Then the final step, third step, is engineering and alignment design for the entire corridor. So these three steps are, these constitute this corridor identification program. And right now, KDOT has completed step one, almost at the end of step one, which is scope of the study itself. So just want to update you what's happening and where the studies are and the status, so that, as a region, collaborating on regional projects is always important for WAMPO staff. So any questions, happy to elaborate. So. Okay, with that, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Appreciate it. All right, this time, public comment opportunity. Anybody like to address the board? If not, moving on, action items, the TIP improvement, amendment number 8, Nick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to present to you today proposed amendment number 8 to the TIP. This is a regularly scheduled amendment, and it is also the amendment through which there would be the implementation of the Project Selection Committee recommendations for 2026 through 2028 projects that you recommended last time, in which the TPB approved earlier this month. So letting you know that that is part of this amendment. We had our public comment period that ended on the 13th of this month. And after this vote, it'll go to the TPB on April 14th. Available on our website, wampo.org/transportation-improvement-program. There are 18 projects requiring formal action. 5 of those are new projects. The rest are amended projects. Plus, we are giving you notice of 4 administratively adjusted projects. These include in Bel Air, modification on the 45th Street Oliver to Woodlawn project. In Derby, the Rock Road corridor improvements. City of Goddard and Sedgwick County, 183rd Street expansion. In Hayesville, Meridian Street and multi-use trail. In Park City, 85th Street and Broadway roundabout. a Redbud multi-use path near Rock Road. In Wichita, also in Wichita, 127th Street, 13th to Douglas, Mount Vernon and Hydraulic Intersection, Kellogg and Eisenhower Parkway Interchange, Broadway Corridor Safety Improvements Project, ITS on from 21st and 119th to downtown. In Butler County, Southwest Butler Road multi-use path at 150th. Yes. In Sedgwick County, Maple Street pathway and the bridge on Seneca between 63rd and 71st, B533. KDOT projects, the I-235 ramps at I-235 and K-96 in Andover. KDOT Andover project US 54 South Backage Road. The Kansas Co-op Andale Rail project and truck transport to rail transport along the Wichita Terminal Association from the 25th Street elevator to the 13th Street flour mill, WTA sub in Wichita, Kansas. A mouthful there. Administratively adjusted projects are in Bel Air, the Bel Air Bike Ped Trail Phase 1, in Wichita, the 29th Street and North and Broadway intersection. A joint project of Butler County and Sedgwick County, the West to Rosewood, East 63rd Street multi-use path, and the KDOT Railroad project, City of Wichita, Burlington, Northern Santa Fe corridor. A quick summary of the ones requiring formal action. They are, as I have just stated them. This includes 12 projects that are, this includes the projects that are getting increases in suballocated funding, as well as projects that have modifications to their scheduling related to that. There's also one project that is being moved up from 2027 to 2026, and one project that's being moved back from 2027 to 2028 as part of this. And also changes in advanced construction conversions, plus the 5 new projects, 2 from Wichita, 3 from KDOT. And of course, you have all this in the handouts that are on the table. We have all the formally adopted projects are out there in that handout that is separate from the packet for the meeting, which contains the map that I just showed, along with the table that is the legend for that map with number references to each of the projects on the map and the cost of those projects. Whereas the handout has all this information, including the summary of the reasons for the changes for all the projects and how much the cost is changed on each project. That's overall cost, not the federal funding cost change. And another slide of the formally amended projects being requested, all 18 of them. And since I mentioned that this includes changes to suballocated funding, here are the 12 projects in 26 through 28 that has suballocated funding and are touched by this amendment or the associated administrative adjustments. Grand total, $16 million more of suballocated funding programmed as a result of this, in keeping with what the TPB just approved earlier this month and what this body recommended based off of the PSC's recommendations last month. Getting all of these projects up to 80% of what their funding level, up to 80% of what their qualifying costs were programmed to be prior to the PSC's meeting on January 22nd. Not necessarily 80% of what they are estimated to cost now, but 80% of what they were estimated to cost on January 22nd when the PSC last met. Federal funding on the projects. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I did not prepare what I was supposed to say for this particular slide. So I guess just to know that we have this information for the amount of federal funding on each individual project and which funding programs it uses. I don't suppose I need to read each line of this, unless you want me to.
No.
Okay. The overall funding changes resulting from all this. In terms of overall project cost, these projects would have a total net cost increase of $40,760,676. That includes an increase of $37 million in federal plus $10 million in state, but a reduction of $6,868,176 in local funding overall on these, which is because of all that extra suballocated funding being put onto projects, therefore less local funding on those projects. Amendment 8 meets all requirements for TIP amendments. We went through our 15-day public comment period. We did not receive any comments during that public comment period. It is consistent with Metropolitan Transportation Plan 2050, or rather all of the projects within it are consistent with Metropolitan Transportation Plan 2050. We confirm that it is fiscally constrained. And as just mentioned, it has about $40.8 million. Any questions before we get into the action options? All right. The action options are to recommend the TPB approve Amendment 8 as presented, recommend the TPB not approve Amendment 8, or recommend the TPB approve Amendment 8 with specific changes. It is the recommendation of WAMPO staff that the TAC recommend that the TPB approve Amendment 8 as presented.
Any questions? Go ahead.
So moved. Second.
The motion and a second to approve as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Nick. Moving on, Charge Up Kansas. Tammy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tammy Alexander with KDOT. I am the Alternative Fuels Program Manager and oversee the NEVI program. So here to give you a bit of an update today. So just a little bit, this is a glamour shot here. I just want to show you, this is our charging station that we installed in Emporia last March. It is awesome. It's got canopies, they've got window washers, it's right up front. Really great high-speed charger, and we're getting good utilization there. So very proud of that location. So currently KDOT has 3 programs that we administer that support EV charging projects. The CMAQ projects, KDOT just acts as a pass-through for that. That comes through KDOT, and we push it out to WAMPO and then Mark, the Kansas City MPO, for them to do their projects. But there's lots of eligible categories under that, as I'm sure you're aware, but EV charging is one of them. We also have the carbon reduction program, where we're allowed to fund many items or many projects that can reduce transportation emissions, but EV charging projects are actually part of that. And we do have one project that KDOT, we went through a process for community charging projects. We had about a dozen interested parties, about half a dozen submitted applications that were approved. We ended up with four projects that we awarded, but with the pause last year, several of them dropped out due to to various issues, funding, timing, et cetera. Some of them got some chargers in their city and didn't need them anymore. So that's a good thing. But we do have one project that's moving forward, and they'll be starting construction here in a couple of weeks at the Rolling Hills Zoo. So they'll have some level 2 charging there. So great place to go and charge up while you're seeing the animals to continue on your way. And then the main thing I'm here to talk about is the NEVI program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program. And we'll go into some specifics on that, but that's the one you hear a lot about, where all the states were allocated funding in order to roll out EV charging across the nation. So Kansas was allocated $39.5 million over 5 years in order to put that network into process, like make that happen. So our updated NEVI guidance was received in August. We had to submit an updated NEVI plan in September. That was submitted to our Federal Highways Division office, and it was approved, and that gave us access to our funding again after that federal pause in funding last year. So initially, the funding is limited to be used on EV charging corridors. And I've got a map on the next page that'll show you what those corridors are. But essentially, it's the interstates and then a couple of other major U.S. highways in Kansas. We have to fully build out those corridors before we can use the funding in other parts of the state. We know there's a lot of Kansas that's not close to one of these corridors, so we know there's a lot more charging that we need to build out. But once we get to that point, we'll be able to put charging, community charging. We can put charging in some of these rural areas where there's very limited or no access to EV charging. A NEVI station, when we talk about built out, they have to have 4 150 kilowatt or greater ports. They have to have the CCS connectors. We're also requiring the NACS connectors. That's the new name for what used to be called the Tesla connector, but it's open access now, and a lot of vehicle manufacturers are moving to that connector. So KDOT is also requiring that they have that connector as well, so that these charging stations will be useful into the future. The new guidance that was received in August removed what was previously a requirement that we have stations every 50 miles. KDOT is planning to keep pretty close to that because of the way that our counties are laid out. We have county seats, approximately every 50 miles. So that wasn't a difficult ask for us in order to make that happen. But we do have a few locations where we might spread that out, 60 miles, et cetera. We're definitely trying to keep it under 75 to make sure some of those older electric vehicles don't have an issue traveling from city to city. And we also were required previously with the old guidance that the stations had to be within 1 mile of the corridor. That has been removed, which is giving us a little more access to communities to be able to put these charging stations in areas where there are amenities that drivers want to see. The funding does require a 20% local cash match. That can be supplied by the community, can be supplied by the developer, site host, et cetera. They just can't be federal funding. So that there is some skin in the game for these developers. But if you want more information, you can go on our website. The actual URL is kind of complicated, but if you just go to the ksdot.gov website and you look under programs, multimodal programs, then you can find the NEVI program and find out more info. So I told you I'd show you the EV charging corridors. These are our corridors throughout the state of Kansas. As I said, it's the interstates. And then we also included US 400 along the east-west, along the southern portion of the state. As we all know, that's a pretty highly traveled corridor, runs right through here. Wichita on Kellogg. So that was one that we definitely wanted to include and make sure we had adequate charging along there. And then that section from Salina up to the Nebraska border, I think a lot of people just think it's I-135 that continues, but it actually gets renamed to US 81, but looks the same when you're driving on it, still looks like interstate. So we included that as well. So this is what EV charging looks like across Kansas right now. If you look at those dots, fairly spread out, not too bad. But this map includes level 2 charging, which takes a little longer to charge. So if we take those level 2 charging stations out of there, you can see there is a big gap in the southwest part of the state where there's no DC fast charging. That means if you're doing long distance travel, you're going to be sitting for a few hours waiting for your car to charge at a level 2 charger. Since I put this map together, there has been a dealership in Garden City, which is the intersection of those two highways in the southwest part of the state, that has put in one DC fast charging port. So there is a port out there that can rescue you, but we are targeting Garden City. If you see here on our next map, this is our target locations that we're looking at. The yellow, kind of orangey yellow color, those are stations that KDOT has awarded and that will be moving forward with construction. Some of those we have lost, though, with the considerable pause last year. The financials of the stations changed. Some of their bids that they had put in where they just were no longer going to cover. I mean, the costs of things change when you pause something for 9 months. So we have several stations that will not be moving forward, which gives us a pretty big gap. You can see here between Kingman and Garden City. So we'll be looking to fill those back in our next round, which I'll talk more about later. And then east of Wichita on 400 in the southeast part of the state, we lost almost all of our developers due to the pause and different considerations with that. But we'll be looking to rebid some of those locations also to get that corridor filled out. We know that's a big corridor for people going to Grand Lake and Table Rock. So definitely one that we need to get filled in. So this is another look at our Emporia charging station. It's the only one that we have open right now. Just by the luck of how things had worked out, that one had been obligated before the pause last year, so it was allowed to continue, and it opened in March. And it is, as I said before, it's getting really good utilization. You can see in the photograph there, and there's been comments actually on PlugShare. The chargers are under a canopy, just like gas pumps, and some of the people have driven right by it and didn't even realize it wasn't gas pumps. And they're like, oh, there's the chargers right there. So that's really great. Really good location. If you're an electric vehicle driver, definitely encourage you to stop there. Emporia was our #1 requested location across the state in order to get charging in there. But it connects Wichita with Topeka, Kansas City. So 3 biggest cities in the state, making sure we've got that connection there. It was a huge ask. So coming up next, our first round of stations, Belleville. It's up there on 81 near the Nebraska border. They're actually starting construction on that one today. That should be finished. They estimate about 6 weeks for construction, dependent on weather, of course. You know, if we get a ton of rain or heaven forbid, even maybe snow, that might slow them down a little bit, but that'll be open by summer. Garden City, they're planning to start construction on that one in May. And again, that one should be finished up by the end of June. It's about 6 weeks construction period with that one. For round 2, we had 9 projects that awarded. We've had 3 that have dropped out due to, changes with the financial during that federal pause. We have executed contracts for 5 of those projects, and I expect another one to be coming in this week. So those should be moving forward soon. One of them is actually here in WAMPO's territory up in Park City. So it's at the Sinclair in Park City. And so that one will be coming, I don't know, we'll see. We're going to be meeting with the developers here in the next few weeks and learn more about what their timeline is and when they expect that station to be built and open to the public. So for round 3, we are working right now to get our RFI, request for interest, out within the next few weeks. We do want to get information from developers, site hosts, et cetera, in the area to see what they're interested in building out. We're targeting 13 locations with that. We'll have 9 that'll be brand new charging stations completely developed from the ground up. So there's no charging existing. And then we have 4 locations where there is some charging. Those are all at the service areas on the turnpike. So some of those, there is some charging there, but it's either not very many ports or lower level. And so we need to upgrade that to meet those NEVI requirements of the 4 150 kilowatt charging ports. As I said, we should have that RFI out within the next few weeks, and the RFP will probably become late spring, early summer, depending on the timeline with what kind of feedback we get from the RFI. If we don't have a lot of interest, we may have to go back to the drawing board and change some of our target areas for filling out that map. So One thing that could also throw a wrench in that is any changes that might be happening at the federal level. There was a proposal from Federal Highways to change the Buy America requirements to 100% domestic content, which would be a challenge for EV charging equipment. There's just a handful of components that just are not even made in the U.S. They took comments on that last week, and many were submitted. It was over 200 comments when I checked this morning that had been submitted, overwhelmingly saying, no, just leave the requirements where they are, which is currently 55%. But changes to that could affect what we ultimately do with our RFP. So stay tuned. We'll see what happens at the federal level. And once we get that round 3, we should be able to request that our state is classified as fully built out, which allows us to move into community charging and build charging. We can right-size charging. That gives us more flexibility to put in level 2 charging or smaller DC fast charging, and to move in areas off of those corridors and add additional charging throughout other areas of the state where we know it's desperately needed. So here's a look at the locations that we'll be targeting. Almost all of these have been run in a previous round. Some of them round 1 or round 2. We did make some adjustments. KDOT, in addition to the requirements at the federal level, KDOT adds additional requirements. For instance, dusk to dawn lighting, it's not in the federal requirements, but KDOT does require it. We also require that they have a restroom available on site, food nearby or on site, things that when we have surveyed EV drivers, they tell us that they need and that they want to have when they stop. Just like a gas driver, you want to be able to get, a fresh coffee or a slushie. EV drivers want the same types of things. So these will be the locations that we'll be targeting. And I mentioned some service areas that we'll be looking at as well. These are the 4 service areas where we will be doing upgrades. As I said, they all currently have EV charging available, but it just isn't at that either the number of ports that are necessary or the charge level that's necessary. The higher the kilowatts, the faster the cars charge. So, and as I said, if we get responsive proposals from all of these locations, we should be able to reach fully built out and give us the opportunity to move into other parts of the state. So our selection process, I thought I might go over that just a little bit since we're moving into the RFI, RFP process. We do have to do that 2-step process. We use that request for interest, one, to help us develop the RFP to better fit what developers are looking to do in the state, but then also so that we can pre-qualify those developers and make sure that we've got quality entities that are looking to submit proposals. So they have to respond to that RFI in order to respond to the RFP. At that point, KDOT then selects the lowest responsive bidder for each targeted location. Responsive means they've met all the requirements, both the federal requirements and the additional KDOT requirements that I mentioned, such as restrooms, food, lighting, etc., in addition to some specific requirements for the entities. Like we want to see that they've talked with the utility and know that they can have enough power to power the station when it's built there, that they have an agreement with the site host. If the site host is not the one requesting the funding, we want to make sure that they have an agreement. We have received proposals where somebody's like, hey, I want to build a charging station at this area. But the person who owned the property was like, no, I don't think we want that. Like they hadn't even spoken to each other. So we're making sure that all of that work has been done when they submit that. And then, we have, certain areas that we're looking to target, and we have it down to like between mile marker X and Y on this highway. So those are the areas that we're looking at. And again, I mentioned some of the additional requirements that KDOT has. Once we get that fully built out certification, we do have a general idea of locations that we're looking at. We don't have any specific target areas like we do for our corridor work. But, you know, we have some cities that serve as like the regional hub for their area. For instance, Great Bend, Kansas. It's not on one of these corridors, but we know that Great Bend serves, you know, medical work, business opportunities, shopping for all the counties surrounding Great Bend. So cities like that we would look at targeting to have the EV charging available in those communities. State parks, we've had interest from the state parks, state wildlife and parks. They've actually had people that are coming in and using the RV hookups to charge their electric vehicles. The connectors all work right, but it's just a different kind of setup, different kind of wiring. So it's not the best fit. So they're looking to put in chargers at the state parks, historical sites, you know, those rural communities where we need to have charging, of course, scenic byways, et cetera, but lots of different types of locations that we're looking at. And just a few maps here to share with you. You know, this is kind of a look at some of those regional hubs that we talked about. I mentioned Great Bend, Coffeyville. It's another one, you know, some of those areas with community colleges that serve as the target areas for the counties surrounding them. Liberal, that's another one. People come from surrounding areas to come in, do shopping, medical care, business, etc. So looking at some of those areas, there's a smattering of the state parks, if you're not familiar with where they are in Kansas. And then our historic and scenic byways, that's those, they're like a wider white area with a dash line. Those are the byways, looking to put some charging along some of those. Just an overview of where we're at with the NEVI funding. As I said, we were allocated about $39.5 million over the 5 years. That shows, you know, each year how much we were awarded. We had to submit a plan update each year in order to access the next year's funding. For round one, ultimately, we've had a couple backed out because of the pause last year that we're going to be replacing hopefully in round three. So a little over 2 million in round one, nearly 5 million from round two awards. And so we're estimating just under 9 million for round three. And then, you know, that should leave us about 23 million in order to build out other parts of the state. So we should have a good amount of funding to be able to get charging in any communities around the state that are interested. And there's my contact information that you can always email the ChargeUp KS email address if you've got any questions, and one of us will get back with you. But with that, I'm happy to take any questions about the NEVI program or EV charging in Kansas in general. So.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Tammy. Great presentation. It's good to see what's the status of this happening. Could you please help us understand the local match on the federal funding? How much percentages?
Yeah, it's 20% local match that's required, and that can be made up from multiple entities. Like that doesn't have to come from specifically the developer or specifically the community, or you could even, you know, a little bit from each to pull it together, but 20% of the cost has to be non-federal funding. There's currently not allocated state funding to go towards EV charging. There are a few programs, the Innovation Hub, I think is what it's called. Infrastructure Hub, Kansas Infrastructure Hub has some funding to go with the IIJA funding, which is what NEVI was under. So there's something that they could potentially apply for to get some state funding to support it. But there's, you know, several options they can use to put together that 20%.
Thank you so much.
Certainly.
Any other questions?
Ballpark, what does one of these cost? I mean, I understand you gotta get lighting and all of the other stuff.
Right.
Power. We talking.
Right. So what we averaged in rounds 1 and 2, the average federal award was 768,000 was the federal award. So just under $1 million, you can, you know, estimate for the charging stations. Now that's very dependent on the costs, the utility costs to get the power to the station. So if it's adequate, if everything's there, you can keep your costs down a little more. If you've got to do some serious upgrades to the power grid in order to get the power there, then that can definitely run your costs up.
Go ahead.
Sorry, one more question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And who are eligible applicants for this award? Thank you.
Pretty much anybody. I mean, we have awarded, all of them so far have been awarded to private businesses. But a city could apply, a county, university. So public entities are also eligible to apply. But yeah, it's pretty much open to anybody. So
Thank you so much.
sure.
Else?
In Kansas, is there more of an push to just add stations, or are we looking to specifically upgrade the moderate chargers up to the fast chargers?
It's mostly adding stations. If you look at this map, let me get back here. This one right here, you can see like the whole southwest quarter of the state. There is no DC fast charging, except I mentioned that one dealership charger that had gone in Dodge City. So mostly we're just trying to fill gaps so that if you drive an electric vehicle, you're not going to be stranded somewhere waiting 4 or 5 hours for your car to charge on a level 2 charger, that you'll be able to, get on with your trip. These DC fast charger stations that we're putting in, it's very much like the gas station experience. You're going to pull in, you're going to get a decent charge on your vehicle in 15, 20 minutes, grab a coffee and be on your way. So in the next phase, we'll be able to do that level 2 charging that's more, that you would have it like a state park. You usually don't stop at a state park for 15, 20 minutes. You're usually there for a few hours. So you can plug in with your level 2 and your car is charged and ready to go when you leave. So
What's the cost difference between a level 2 and a level 1 charger?
Well, just as an example, we're putting in 4 level 2 chargers at Rolling Hills Zoo, and that came in, I think, right around 100,000. So it's pretty significant cost difference.
Anything else? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Good.
I'll get
Moving
that.
on, complete streets. Katie?
There you go.
Thank you. All righty. Oops. There we go. All righty. So I have for you today, I am currently leading the Complete Streets Committee for an advisory committee, sorry. So I wanted to have a picture right here to kind of give you an idea of what a complete street can really pack into just a single street. And I got that picture from AARP, see an example of a complete street. So complete streets is a policy and a design approach that ensures streets and roads are safe and accessible for all users. So Complete Streets Advisory Committee will be starting up next month on April 22nd. It'll be at 9:30 a.m. in the morning. And we anticipate to have it ending in October with a completion of a regional policy and a toolkit. Let me get right here. And then I have just a short list of things that the committee is going to achieve and discuss during this time period. So, accommodating all road users, having clear and accountable expectations of a complete streets policy and project, addressing a variety of WAMPO member jurisdiction characteristics, establishing roadway design best practices, considering the context of roadways, incorporating complete streets metrics into project selection criteria, and having clear steps implementing complete streets policies. If you are interested in joining or are just interested in sitting in during it, feel free to email me and I will make sure to add you to that email invite. Any questions?
Thank you.
You.
Hey, commuter flow report. Peter?
Hello again. Last update item of the meeting. I will try to go quickly here. So I was going to present on our annual commuter flows report. There we go. So in general, when you connect where someone lives to where they work. Thank you, Nick. You create a commuter flow. So analysis of commuter flows shows how people travel between work and home across cities, counties, and regions. And understanding commuter flows can provide insight into demands on the transportation system. It can help support transportation planning activities. So where does this information come from? The U.S. Census Bureau provides commuter data through two complementary sources. You have the American Community Survey, which is survey-based data that provides estimates on commuting characteristics such as average commute time, commute mode, and labor force participation, and is typically what most people are familiar with when you go online and search census.data.gov. This is the kind of data you'll find. A less well-known source, but very useful one, and yes, this whole bold thing is the name, the Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics, which is the branch of the census that collects this data, produces a data product called LOADS, or Origin Destination Employment Statistics. And it's based off of administrative data, for example, anonymized W-2 information that links where workers live and work. So the report that WAMPO develops is primarily based on annual releases of this data, in particular the loads data, but we also put some ACS data in there to provide additional context. The 2025 report is based on loads data that was released December 18th, 2025, and it reflects 2023 commuter estimates. The ACS data, the ACS 5-year data released is from 2024, and it also reflects 2023 estimates. It was the most recent available ACS data at the time of the loads data release. Primarily, the report details by city loads commuter data on inflow, internal flow, and outflow of commuters by city. So you can see on here, the inflow is where people who live outside a city but work. This is an example from Hayesville. You can see inside the circle of arrows, we put the internal flow, or those who live and work in Hayesville. And then the outflow on the far side of the graph that are those that live in Hayesville but work outside. And we have this detailed for each city in WAMPO. In addition to the commuter flow data, the reports have also included ACS estimates for average commute time and labor force participation rate. In the 2025 report, among several other formatting and aesthetic changes, we also include additional city-level data available from ACS that include the commuter mode shares, like how people get to work and travel to work by time of day. And I'll just go through some examples from Derby, and I tried to just leave it with the graphics and images from the port. So you can see here's Derby's inflow, internal flow, and outflow. The travel to work by mode share, that's from the American Community Survey. And then travel to work by time of day. Derby's a little bit earlier in getting to or departing for work. They peak at 7 to 7:30. The median for the whole region is most people typically go to work or depart for work between 7:30 and 8. And then this is the internal inflow and outflow of different commuters for Derby as well. And you can see internal flow has increased over the past 5 years for Derby. The inflow was at 6,050 in 2019 for Derby, went down in 2020, and then is now back and a little bit above 2019 levels. And the outflow has steadily increased since 2019 for Derby. And that's just an example of what we have for each one. We also have a heat map for by where people work or live. So in this particular one, you see those who work in Derby, where they live. So if you work in Derby, this is a heat map of the residents of those different workers. And we have just a bar graph of the different distances that they fall into. So less than 10, 10 to 25, 25 to 50. As with most of the cities, most people live within 10 miles of their place of work. And then conversely, we look at those who live in Derby where they work. So if you live in Derby, this is the heat map of locations, estimated locations where they work. And you can see a very similar trend where most people, their place of work and their residence is within about 10 miles. And we have that for each of the cities. And then I just want to bring your attention online. We also have a commuter flows dashboard that we posted, and you can see the city flows between the different cities, city by city. And on this one, you can see it there. I circled in red. We have the select a city and commuter flow type. So you can look at inflow or outflow. By selecting a city and flow type in the dashboard, The table in the left panel will update with the estimates on commuter shares by city. So you can see at the top, selected Colwich, selected inflow. And for this particular table, you can see if you look at the Wichita line, it's estimated that out of all the people employed in Colwich, approximately 354 or 45% or so have their place of residence in Wichita. And you can see that city by city for any city in WAMPO. And I want to mention that all of this data is consistent and can be found on LEHD's loads dashboard on the map. Actually, the on the map tool has a significant amount of information, national information, but with huge amounts more data also comes a much more complex user interface. So we decided to put this one on there. So if you just want to take a quick look at the WAMPO flows, you could do so quite easily.
Any questions for Peter? If not, any other business before the board? No, we stand adjourned. Thank you all.